At long last, and with big thanks to Isaiah Jones for locating this and sending it to me, it's finally time to review Space Jazz. If you got that reference, you're a true psychopath, and I like you, kid. If you want to give Isaiah a big thanks for helping me out, you can subscribe to his YouTube channel, Nihilist Sauce. Link is in the description. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video and you aren't subscribed already, please consider it. And your likes, please give. So I want to preface this whole video. I had my expectations for this figure set so high. The previous space character, Space Bumblebee, wound up on my best of year list for 2021. It was an incredible little figure that was something the fandom desperately needed. It had a few problems, like having the kind of face that doomed him to a dateless life, and some kibble that could pop off too easily, but overall, it was a triumph of a figure that did every core aspect of being a Transformer well to great. And those were the expectations I went into this figure with. And then it turned out incredibly underwhelming. I'm gonna be honest with you up front. I'm gonna tell you the contents of this whole review right now. The only thing this figure does well is accessories. Yeah, the best thing about this guy is what he comes with. And before I go any further, I have been getting reports from some of you guys that your copies broke. It seems like a credible issue to me with this thing being like 30% clear plastic, so be wary of that. Also, yes, I know people have been stealing the chest plate from this figure in the box. I saw an instance of that myself in real life just the other day. So with this video, I'm pretty much just gonna tell you to stay away. If you want to learn all the reasons why you should, then I suppose stay tuned. Before I got this, I thought that my only real issue with the figure was going to be the look of the robot mode. Very blatantly, his chest is strange, and his legs have half the car clipping through them. However, in hand, I can say that the legs bother me less than I expected. Yet on the other, Jesus Christ, the backpack! You could fit his torso in there twice over. While not quite as tall, this is Ursy levels of storage space in there. Focusing on the chest, Jazz seems to have hit old age, because his tits are sagging. I can't tell if these should have been shorter or longer so the angle wasn't so steep either way. It almost works, it's probably only off by degrees, but it's unpleasant to look at like it is. What's not an aesthetic problem though, is how much this part likes to fall off. And it's clear plastic, so you always have that ball tightness when it does, as the thought, is this the time that it breaks in half? Courses between your ears. Outside that, and the backpack that eats lesser backpacks, this is mostly an okay rendition of the character. I'm fine with the leg kibble. I like the fact that he's slightly longer in the waist than normal, even if it has these two slits that run down it for literally no reason. What, did Jazz get his robo-kidney stolen and they didn't even bother sewing him back up? This mode is overall proportional. There's basically no visible hollowness outside of the extremely ignorable amounts in his wrists, and the whole thing is toleranced tightly. Perhaps a little too much so. This thing moves, and it moves smoothly. But I can't think of a better way to phrase this than to say that it resents you for moving it. You are unworthy to touch him, and the fact that he lets himself be subject to you is an insult. I don't have any worry that this guy won't hold a pose, but it's just not fun to get him how you want. And from the people I've talked to, that seems to be a common complaint. Better to be slightly too tight than too loose, but it's a frustration that this thing didn't need when none of the rest of it is executed well enough. The plastics feel good in quality, but like I said earlier, that doesn't seem to save this thing from breaking, and the head is kind of cheating, because this is just ripping off the already spectacular 86 Jazz head, copying that boy's homework wholesale. I'm not going to complain too much because the head is actually really good, and I wouldn't want them to do something to mess it up just for the sake of being different. The Space Bumblebee did that, and I wound up putting that thing's head in the trash. But they could have given him a smirk or something. If we're just getting two of the exact same head, why not give this a little of the guy's personality? They did that with the Seekers, so we know the idea is on their minds. Ultimately, the look of the robot mode isn't a crime or anything, but it's not good. From the chest looking depressed, to the backpack he fit all of his worldly possessions into, to the shins bisected in a most unnatural way. It just has some really serious flaws, and at best the sculpt around those is unoffensive. It's not doing anything to make up for all that, aside from maybe doing stuff like putting gap covers on the thighs. And the quality control is suspect, to say the least, with the way that the tits like to fall off, and the way that the figure is reported to break. Like I said, it's not terrible, it's just rocking like a 4.5 out of 10. Very close to being actually good, but just held back from it. Now the accessories I actually kind of like a lot. For starters, they deigned to give him a new gun. This isn't just the same gun the 86 version came with unpainted, it's an entirely new sculpting. And honestly, I prefer this one with its narrower barrel and more classic toy build. It's a good gun, but what I'm more excited for is his other accessory. This is one of the only Jazzes ever, and I believe the first mainline one, to come with the grappling hook he used from that one time in that one episode. You know the one. You can't attach the two pieces with a string or anything like that, so this is really more of a tiny weird rocket launcher that pegs into the backs of his wrists. And if you use it like that, I won't stop you, but I will judge you. And that's it. I didn't mean to overhype you on how much he'd be getting, it's just that this is the one aspect of the figure that I don't have any real criticism for. He's got more than average accessories, and they are all of at least average in quality, so good for him. He scores the point that matters the least in whether or not you should pick a figure up. I was gonna go lower, but honestly, I'll give the posability a 5 out of 10. It would be the most average of averages if it weren't for one serious flaw, but it does have an above average head with a good bit of up and down and a little bit of waggle, 90 shoulders, there would be a forwards butterfly, but that pops off the chest if you try to use it, 90 elbows, narcissus wrists, hips have standard range in all directions, legs that do not pull a 90 by a not insubstantial amount, and ankles that pivot and have a toe down. Like I said, this is all basically as standard as it gets, but it's got a slightly, and I mean slightly above average head, and these that are more below average. The forwards butterfly is honestly probably the biggest threat to the chest piece, as trying to, or accidentally, using that bit of articulation causes the breastplate to fire off like it's spring-loaded. And that is a recipe for scratching the paint off the clear plastic at the very least, if not flat out snapping that part. So yeah, it's acceptable on the posing, but like a depressing kind of acceptable. Transformation straight sucks. It would be brutally simple and unsatisfying if it weren't for the fact that everything is locked together with the grip of a Karen's fist around a manager's throat. This borderline feels like it was glued together, and this is transforming it in the easy direction. Going into robot mode is actually harder since you have nowhere to grab this thing. Getting these leg panels out to the side is a goddamn nightmare, and then there is a case of intense Play-Doh factor where you have to mush this thing to try and get everything to place properly by the end. This ain't a moderately bad transformation. This is just garbage. And the fact that you wind up with this much of the robot mode floating underneath the figure is unacceptable given how much internal space this thing doesn't take advantage of. However, for the most part, if you pretend that that's not there, then this alt mode is awesome. I don't know that anyone ever really considered the possibility that we would get this. This is an alt mode from like 10 total seconds of the whole show. And while this was the only thing that was moving on screen in the shots that it's from, it was also just off in the distance. So for what that was, this is a pretty great representation of it. It doesn't have the ability to roll, and I don't like having it sit on anything hard, because it is just resting on the forearms of the robot mode, so vibrations will scratch this up. But honestly, I don't know why I care. Because this is a really good alt mode. That's pretty much everything I could have ever wanted it to be. It's even well paint matched, but I don't know that I'm ever planning on putting this back into robot mode. That's how bad the rest of this figure is. The transformation is enough of a pain in the ass on its own that I really wouldn't want to deal with it in most instances anyway. And that's assuming that the robot mode was good enough that I want to go back to that. But the bot mode here is just kind of this side of bad. It doesn't look good because of the unreal backpack and the no fun bags on his chest. And while the legs don't bother me like I feared, they don't help. And speaking of not helping, the rest of the sculpt isn't either. The parts that aren't offensive aren't good, they're just not offensive. And the posability is the kind of average that feels bad. It's technically fine, but it's so unremarkable that it becomes restrictive. I can't do anything with this because he can't fully commit to any pose. Is he casually standing around? Great. Is he doing anything more? No, because he can't. I wanted to love this thing. I expected it at the very least to be anywhere near as good as the previous figure, and it's just not. It honestly feels outdated. If you told me that this was a figure that was designed in the same line as Generation's 2014 Nightbeat that wound up going unproduced till they resurrected it right now, I'd believe you wholeheartedly. Hell, I'd probably be willing to put money down on this guy being designed by that same dude. For an articulated modern Transformers figure, it makes a good space car. The other factors will leave you wanting, except for the transformation, which will leave you running for the hills. It just doesn't live up to the precedent set by that previous Bumblebee, and it's different enough that I sincerely do have to wonder if this was made by a different designer. But like when there are 2 years separating these two figures, I don't know why that would be the case. They had the time to get the correct guy on the project, and even if it wasn't the same guy, they should have had the time to hammer out any problems the figure wound up having. This isn't part of a whole wave of figures that all had to come out at the same time, it's a one-off. I wouldn't have complained if this came out next year as long as it was better than this. Hasbro, I wish you would take your time if it means we get products worth our money. And thanks, Isaiah. You really did help me a lot, and I don't want to sound ungrateful. I just wish I had better news to report. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.